And welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler. I host this radio show each and every week. If you are a new listener, welcome. I hope you find it valuable. On the show, we talk about all things estate planning. So wills, trust, powers of attorney, different documents that people need. I own an estate planning law firm in Cranberry Township, and we serve people all over Western Pennsylvania. And one of the things that I'm real passionate about and why I'm in this industry in the first place is it seems super important to me that we work our whole lives, we accumulate some stuff, we have some money, we have whatever it is, and we want that stuff upon our death to get to our family members or our favorite nonprofit or whatever it is. We talk on this show an awful lot about the financial stuff. So, we talk about preserving the house, we talk about taxes, we talk about not losing things to long-term care expenses. But one of, I think, the opportunities that lots and lots and lots of families miss is the opportunity to do planning with their story, planning with the digital assets on their phone, for example. I was recently doing one of our workshops, and I asked the crowd two questions. One, has anyone here put an actual physical photo into a physical photo album in the last 6 months? And out of the 50 people there, of course, nobody said yes. And then the other question I asked them was, can anyone here name all 8 of their great grandparents' first names? All 8. And I ask that question a lot. Nobody can ever do it, which I just think is terrible, because we spend our whole lives on this planet trying to have do things important, and we're sort of the main character in our own life movie. And then to think that our own great grandchildren won't remember our first names really messes with me a little bit. And so I think that there's some things that we ought to consider doing. And I am lucky to be joined by a special guest on a radio show this week. I am able to say that she is the most beautiful woman on the planet. And I'm able to say that because we've been married for 15 years. And her name's Robyn. Robyn's been on the show before. If you missed those previous shows, it's been a while. So Robyn Sechler, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. And just for the record, you're not allowed to introduce anybody else that way.
Wouldn't dare. I know you listen. And so the reason Robyn is here is Robyn has been in the legacy planning space for the last, I'm going to say 5 years or so. She has, and it was kind of an offshoot of things that we wanted to do for our clients here at the law firm, where we think it's super important to record stories and tell and plan well with these digital assets, because everybody's forgetting to do it. Nobody's doing any planning for the assets on their phone, the photos, the videos, and all that. And no one's doing planning for some of the most precious resources that you have, and that's the memories in your head that no one else knows, right? And so it kind of occurred to us that we needed to be doing this for our clients a while ago. And so Robyn was the one who put all the creative effort into how we could make this happen, and she's been doing this, and it's really a beautiful thing. So I wanted Robyn to join us on the show today to sort of give you some tips on how you might start to consider this and start to think about how you could do some planning. So why don't you give the story about why this is so important to you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So about 12 years ago, I lost my dad. And when he was sick, I used to sit with him in his hospice room, and the silence was really hard. And I was young and I didn't really know what to talk about. And one day I decided that I was just going to start asking him questions about his life. And one of those days, I was asking him about what it was like for him to go to school as a kid. And Tim had walked into the room and picked up my BlackBerry, which dates me a little bit, if you remember the old BlackBerry devices. And he pressed the record button. And there was no video at that time, so this was an audio recording. He set the BlackBerry down and walked out of the room. And my dad and I didn't notice. We just kept talking. So my dad passed away 2 days after that recording. And fast forward 8 years from that day, and our daughter, who was just 4 at that time, had found this BlackBerry device. I still have no idea how she found that or how she came across it, but
It
it
was in the
ended up.
drawer. Every family has the
Yes,
drawer of stuff, right?
absolutely. She found it and she thought it was very cool and she started playing with it, and so Tim comes in and he says, you're going to have to take that from her, grab a tissue, and I'll tell you why. And so, very confused, I did, as you asked, and he goes on to tell me about what he had done that day, and that now this BlackBerry had a recording of my dad and I having a conversation all these years ago. And so, of course, I went down the path of figuring out, well, how am I going to get this digital asset, this recording off of the BlackBerry and into a format that I can share it with my kids who had never met him.
Right. He
My
passed before our children were born. So yeah. And
Yeah,
it and we're not a family that does like we don't have like home video
right.
nights or whatever. I remember doing that as a kid, but it's entirely possible. Well, one, now we have to get this audio recording off of this BlackBerry that we don't know how to. We can't remember the password. We don't have a charger for it.
Right.
So get back to the story. I
Yeah, I
interrupted.
remember looking at it and it said 9 out of 10 password attempts, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I have one more shot." And we got lucky and were able to get to the recording that was on that BlackBerry. And the next thing I did was I pulled up the audio next to a photo, with a photo of my dad alongside it, and brought our kids in and let them hear my dad tell his own story about what it was like for him to go to school, which was really, really lucky on our end that we got that subject, because for our kids who were school age, it was really, really relevant.
Yeah.
And they watched the video and they listened to my dad, and it was just a couple of minutes of audio. But what happened next is what surprised me and what really sent me on a path of realizing the importance of this. And they turned around and looked at me and said, "Well, what kind of ice cream did he like? Would he have come to my baseball games? What kind of things did he like to do in his spare time? Would he have played Legos with me?" And they began asking more and more questions about who he was and the kind of person that he was. And in that moment, I realized that we had not been good about preserving our family stories, and many people aren't either. And so that set us on this path of how can we do better to help people to secure their stories alongside their homes and their finances and grandma's piano. Your stories and your memories and your photos are just as important, if not more important, than all of those things.
And it's occurred to me looking back at it that I threw the BlackBerry out on the phone, out on the bed, and I think the reason that like it occurred to me to do that is I had an experience prior to that. I have to give my own father some credit here because I have a video from when I was like 12, back when a video camera had to sit on your shoulder, right, with like a VHS
Right.
tape in it. And Dad had one, and he liked to film a lot of things, and I have a video that is me at 12 or 13 years old listening to my grandfather go through a photo album, old black and white photo album. So some of these photos are probably from the 50s or 40s. I don't know. And he is going through page by page and saying, "This is Bill, and this is Joe, and this was at the church, and this is here, and this was there," and he's explaining what's in the photo album to me. My grandfather's explaining the photo album to me, and my father is recording him telling the story. Right. So if you think about that, the second, that is the only video I own of my grandfather. I don't have it. I've got pictures of my grandfather. I don't have his voice anywhere else. And what he is saying when he said that 30 years ago, he was probably the only person on the planet who knew half of those people in those pictures, right? So it is entirely possible, since most people can't name their own great grandparents, that there isn't another record on the planet of that individual and who they were and where they were and the little anecdote about them. And to me, this is such a powerful thing that I own that and that we have the BlackBerry video. And so it just is so darn important, I think, that we take some time to realize that this is important stuff we're discussing today. We, like I said, on the radio show and in the estate planning practice, we have these workshops and we bring people in and we teach them about trust and we teach them about wills and taxes and all the things. And yes, of course, that stuff is important, but so is this stuff in planning. And Ancestry.com, for example. Ancestry.com is a huge, huge business. I don't know how much money they make a year, but it's a lot, right? And why is Ancestry.com such a big business? And it's because, turns out, we are curious about our ancestors, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like in the Great Depression? What was it like in the Civil War? When did my family come to the United States? How? And and we're living in a point in time in human history, for the first time in human history, that we all have a device in our pockets right now that you can pull out and you can hit record and you can tell some stories. You can tell some stories about what it was like living in the pandemic. You can talk about what it was like living in um, some period of your life. I served in Afghanistan. I could record some stories about serving in Afghanistan. And you're going to record that now in a format that is an MP4 video that will not get old. It will not get brittle. It will not brown. It will not fade. You can save it in a place where it will not get lost. And the first time in human history, I could essentially do a video autobiography telling my own life stories or the things that I think people might find interesting about it. And that will be a living record that my great, 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 as many greats as you want to go, grandchild will have the ability to watch. Um, and I think it is a shame that there are people living in this time of having this technical capability that are gonna miss doing it. They're gonna have forgotten to do it. They're not gonna have thought to do it. I think in 20 years, everybody's gonna be doing this. I think everybody around is gonna say, "Yeah, we're recording everything." Uh, Especially younger generations, because they can't quit recording themselves. They're walking into
Right.
light poles because they can't stop recording themselves. But the older generations who didn't grow up in that era, um, don't miss the opportunity to do this. And so we put together a program that we're launching with our clients. Why don't you get into like sort of the foundation of the program that we're doing with our clients? And for the clients that are watching, we actually have a kickoff event April 1st. It's a Saturday. Robyn and I are gonna do an event to sort of explain how this all works and everything. We've done this for some of our clients, but we're now like really formalizing this is the thing and this is how you're going to do it. And so why don't you kind of explain the thing that we've come up with?
Yeah, one of the biggest sort of roadblocks that we kept sort of hearing whenever we started down this road, if I said to you, "Tell me your family story," it's like that is such a big subject and it's very hard to think about, like, well, what pieces do I tell you? Where do I start? What's the important part? And so what we've done is we have broken this down in a way that is just sort of small consumable pieces.
It's kind of like when somebody asks you to tell a joke and you can never think of one. But
Right.
if somebody told me to like tell a joke about a turtle, like I got one, right?
Right.
Now you've triggered a file in my brain that yeah, I've got a joke about a turtle.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so what we realized was that it when you do a thing like just say tell me your life story, it's like blah,
It's too big. It's too
I don't
big,
yeah,
too
right.
broad of a question. Right. So we have broken down a lot of the main questions that your family, loved ones, that would want to know about you. And it turns out that those are the things that we also want to know about our grandparents and great grandparents and our kids and grandkids and great great grandkids, all the way down, like you were saying, as many generations as you want to go. They want to know those things about us too. They will be as curious then as we are now. And so there's 7 legacy chapters that really cover all of the different stages of life. And some of them relate to everybody and some of them not. And the nice thing is you can really pick and choose which of the chapters feel right to you. For example, if you want to go through your childhood, if you want to discuss retirement or having children or family history, we can really dive into each of those in a more specific way. So even taking those subjects and breaking them down further, like family history, we will share a series of questions with you on a regular basis that say things like, what was your grandfather's name? Let's start there.
Right.
Who was he? Where was he born? What was
Right.
his what did he do for a living? And really just start sort of etching away at some of those key details that are things that people are going to want to know.
Right. And there's two blocks I think that people have on this. And one is they don't know what to do. Right. So these
Mhm.
prompts that we've
Mhm.
come up with that we're going to be giving to our clients over time, so it's not too overwhelming, are going to be the things that they need to say. They're going to be the things that you don't have to think about what to say. You just answer the question and
Right,
record. Right.
exactly.
So that's block number one. Block number two is that what we've seen is people are bashful about this. Like, I never did anything important, or
Uh-huh.
nobody's going to want to know any of
Yes.
this, or I don't want to go on that camera. And it's always the guys, right? Like, so you take grandpa, and grandpa's, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing blah, 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 right? Until you get him to tell one story. And then grandpa's the one sobbing his eyes
Yes.
out about
Every
how
time.
special this is, right? And,
Yes.
and it's funny because it just,
Absolutely.
um, once you get into doing this kind of thing, it really is an important. You've realized the importance of it. You've realized that, like, yeah, one,
Mhm.
maybe it's self validating, like, oh, I my time on the planet was worthwhile, right? But
Mhm.
also, like, my future great grandkid is going to really think that that's an interesting story, right? And I'm glad he's going to know that.
Yeah, the other thing that's really, really interesting and exciting about recording it in a digital format, creating a digital asset, is that it's infinitely shareable. So it's not like the photo album that your grandfather
Yeah,
had, and you're like, there was one of them, and there's how many grandkids on your side?
21.
20 something.
Yeah,
So who gets the photo album, right?
I
And
don't
and
even know where it is.
here that is not an issue. You can share it infinitely across
Yeah.
current and future generations for as many times as you want.
Copy and paste,
Mhm.
and you can say this type of video goes to these people but not those people, right? and
Right.
and and
Yeah.
so it's an interesting thing, and I think, like, this is part of, in my opinion, a comprehensive estate plan, right? Because I get asked all the time, oh, what do I need a will, do I need a trust, do I need and we're going to discuss all those types of things, but that's not really estate planning. Estate planning is not just who gets my stuff, who gets my leftovers when I pass away, right? Yeah, we got to deal with the leftovers, and yes, we want the leftovers to go to where we want them. But I think estate planning, when done correctly, is broader than that. It's an opportunity to honor an individual's life. This is why I love doing it, because it's an opportunity to honor an individual's life. It's an honor to it's an opportunity to, yes, pass on these stories, yes, pass on the house, yes, pass on the money, but really people have this experience of feeling complete when they've done it, right? And I feel
Mhm.
like people who
Mhm.
have never done a comprehensive estate plan kind of feel like a little disorganized, a little
Mhm.
bit like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't know what's going to happen when. I don't know how it would work if I got sick. I don't know how it would work. Like, who cares about the photos on my phone? Well, lots of people care. That's why
Mhm.
Ancestry.com exists, right? And
Yes.
so, if you're interested in learning more about how to put together a comprehensive estate plan, this is a topic that we discuss at our estate planning and elder law workshops, which you can find out any point in time just by going to sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com, and you go to the workshops tab, and we have workshops pretty much every week at this point somewhere around the city. We're doing a heck of a lot of education these days. So come check out the workshop. It's free. It's informative. You're going to learn an awful lot about things like wills and trusts and taxes and how to protect assets from long-term care expenses. And it's really, really valuable information. And then we talk to you, of course, about if you want to actually do some planning, here's what that looks like, and you can learn all about that. And if you decide to move forward with us, great. If you don't decide to move forward with us, then I hope you learned something valuable. But come to one of the workshops, and if you are an existing client of mine or of Sechler Law Firm, and this particular subject matter that we're talking about today is important to you or seems interesting to you, this new program that Robyn and I are launching as part of the law firm. Come to our kickoff event April 1st. Reach out to the law firm. Give us a call at 724-546-4227. Again, 724-546-4227. And just say, hey, I'm Joe and I'm a client. And I heard Tim and Robyn talking about the memory event and I would like to come to it. It's going to be April 1st in Cranberry Township at the Regional Learning Alliance. We're going to go pretty much all morning. It should be a really, really interesting event. And then there's going to be a follow-up after the event on how you're going to continue to be able to do these videos and how to organize it. And we put together a whole program for you on the whole piece. Anything to add to that?
That sounds like you covered it.
Yeah. And, it's just, I think it's worth just taking the minute to just say this. There's going to be some people who are gonna think, I'd love to do that, but I think that's like too ego driven or something.
Yes.
Like it's too much about me. It's too much about me. Like my estate plan is about the kids. The estate plan is about getting the kids stuff. Or like I'm not comfortable talking about myself. I've been taught my whole life to be humble and not talk about myself, right? And yeah, you have, and that's appropriate. However, you're not doing this for you. You're not doing this for your sake. The same reason why when I said earlier, if you had the opportunity to listen to this whole show, I said nobody can name all their great grandparents, and you probably can't either. And you probably think, man, that's a shame. And I hope this conversation has like maybe even piqued your interest in looking up your ancestors. But it is perfectly natural to be curious about our ancestors, right? And I think we all are. I would love to know some stories. I know I've got family members who served in the Civil War, for example, right? Both sides. I would love to know some stories, right? And I'll never know. It's completely unknowable. But now we live in a period of time where you can show the love to the future generations, your great grandkids whom you've never met, and explain some of these things, because then when it's time for them to get curious about you, there it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you said it exactly right. This is not for us, right? This is really a gift for future family members and current family members, who are also curious about, family history and the importance of knowing who our ancestors were and really keeping that alive so that you can honor your family.
Yeah, I've made my mom sit down and do this.
Yes,
I put the
right.
video camera in front of my mom and started grilling her. And I could have prepared her a little bit more, I think. Why are we doing this? Well, she didn't have the benefit of listening to this radio show first.
Right.
But now I've got these stories, and I learned an awful lot that day, and about her childhood and where she grew up and how she grew up, and I learned an awful lot about her, and it was a really cool experience. And now I've got this video that I can share with my siblings, whom I'm sure don't know all these stories as well. And it just is kind of a neat thing. And so I encourage you to give it some consideration, whether you just go do it on your own or whether you work with somebody like us to get it done as part of an estate plan. To me, this is just important stuff. Please don't miss that opportunity. Okay. I got about a minute left on the show here, honey. Anything else you wanna make sure that people understand? Why don't you go through the 7 different chapters that we've set out that we're going to be working with our clients?
Sure. Yeah. So the 7 different chapters, if you remember, are the ways that we sort of break down all of the questions and prompts just to make it easier and more concise. So those chapters are being your childhood. It's childhood, adolescence, marriage, getting married, having kids, career, and the retirement years are always, a really fun one to work through with people. And lastly would be family history. And so we really try to cover all the bases and make sure that we are hitting important times in your life. And
spatter throughout all that is like interesting things. Like we ask you about your hobbies, we ask you about your interests, we ask you about your vacations, we ask you
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
um, your first love, whether or not it was grandma who was your first
Right.
love, right? And
Yes.
and just all these little stories that I think are good. And you don't have to answer all the questions, but
Right.
this structure that Robyn came up with the 7 chapters and then specific prompts within those chapters
Hmm.
really gives a really interesting and useful framework for doing this. And
Hmm.
so it's really a cool thing. Listen, I appreciate you listening to this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. If you'd like to learn more about Sechler Law Firm, please go to sechlerlawfirm.com and check out one of our workshops. Existing clients we'll see on April 1st. Please call in, register, come to the memory planning event that we're having on April 1st. It'll be an awesome day. You'll get to meet Robyn, and you'll find out she's really the smart one in the relationship and all that. So thanks for listening this week. Have a great week.